Hi everyone. Alright, so I'm going to be preparing for you Parcel 2. The first course is going to be an Italian egg drop soup. What you have here is some basic ingredients for an Italian egg drop soup, also known as a stracciatella soup. I'm going to be working on some knife cuts first. And talking you through the knife cuts. First I'll be cutting up a few different types of mushrooms, some button mushrooms and some shiitake mushrooms. With shiitakes you'll have to remove the stem. I left the stem on one just so you could see. I'll set the stem aside because it's something that I won't be using for now. It's not edible. I could use it for a stock, so I'll set it aside and use it for a stock maybe later. The stems on these button mushrooms are fine, so I will leave them as is. These mushrooms are pretty clean, so I don't have to worry about knocking any dirt off of them or anything. If they did have some dirt on them, I would make sure not to wash them. Mushrooms are like sponges, and so you definitely don't want them to take on any water. They'll lose nutrients and just get this soggy kind of consistency that's really off-putting. And so just brushing the dirt off is how you'll want to treat them. So first I'm going to take my shiitake mushrooms and just do like a nice thin slice. Probably about 1/8 of an inch in thickness, maybe just a touch thinner than that even would be just fine. I don't mind if they have a little bit of chew to them when they're in the broth, because this is going into a soup broth. And, you know, shiitakes come in all different sizes, and so these were rather large, which is nice. There we go. Okay, buttons. Same thing, just a thin slice. I could do wedges if I wanted to. I kind of want these to break down relatively quickly. So I'm going to do thin slices again. This is a quick soup. This is a really quick meal to put together. When I worked in restaurants, it was something that I used to put together a lot as a staff meal. It's like a good 15-minute meal. Really simple, inexpensive, quick to make, delicious, and relatively healthy too. So just cut these mushrooms in half, thin slicing them. Okay. Set my mushrooms aside. Next, I'm going to go for my Roma tomatoes. Sometimes I'll do my stracciatella a little bit more tomatoey. I think tonight I'm just going to keep it pretty basic, so just 2 Romas. Could do a little more if I wanted. Just doing like pretty rustic presentation, so a large dice, but I'm not worried about the insides. I'm not worried about it being perfect. Relatively uniform. Relatively. Even if some of it's smaller and breaks down first, that's okay. It'll break down into the broth. Okay, next I'm going to be working on the brunoise shallot. You'll be getting a whole shallot in your parcel. You'll want to peel it first. And then kind of treat it the same way as you would an onion if you're trying to do a nice fine brunoise. I find if you go back and forth and really aren't thoughtful about your knife cuts when using a shallot, you really do mess with the flavor of it. It muddies the flavor up, so you want to be pretty precise about how you cut into it. And so doing those horizontal cuts and vertical cuts to get it really, really small dice, or even better, a fine brunoise is the way to go. So I'm doing like super close together cuts. And then go up above. Still close together. this guy I'll just put to the side. there. Pull these extra pieces off to the side. Probably save that for a stock. Because it's kind of like onion scraps, basically in the same family. Can't let it go to waste. Really good flavor, but not necessarily for the application that we're using it for. Okay. Next, I'm gonna do just a mince of the onion, or sorry, mince of garlic clove rather. Because this is a rather large garlic clove, I actually am gonna kind of abide by that same horizontal cut, vertical cut method that I do with onions. I just find it's just easier that way. It makes less of a mess. And I'll probably run my knife through it again if I have to, because I wanted a nice fine mince, but this at least kind of keeps it contained a little bit more. Okay. Okay, now last I just want to talk about one more ingredient, your baby spinach. You'll see, come closer, you'll see that the baby spinach is pretty stemmy, these long stems. You want to pick those little stems off. Technically, they're edible, they'll break down. This is the difference between refined food and not refined food. Now, technically, I guess I could do a little bit more trimming on these tomatoes, and if I wanted it like truly refined, then I would do like the perfect dice on these tomatoes. But to me, there is really a difference in refinement of technique when it comes to taking off the stems of a piece of spinach like this. It really doesn't break down the same way. It does kind of get stuck in your teeth in a different way. And so with what we're eating with a soup, it is off-putting. And so to take the time to pick that spinach, it's worth it and really does make sense to put your efforts in there. Okay, and then lastly, I'm just gonna take a couple of ingredients and manipulate them a little bit. So in a classic stracciatella or an Italian egg drop soup, there is a combination of Parmesan cheese and egg yolk, or whole egg, that is mixed together, and then that's actually whisked into the broth. So I'm just gonna, ahead of schedule, actually I'll reserve just one pinch for garnish of Parmesan cheese. I have one whole egg and about 2.5 tablespoons of Parmesan cheese there. I'm just gonna whisk it together. And I'm gonna drizzle this into my broth when the time comes. All right, we'll take a little break.